Hi, good morning. It's Jim from the maverickstar Observatory. Guys, we're going to hit the road running this morning with a data set that's been sent from us from one of our superstars over in Perth, Australia. Jeff, thanks very much. And what we can see from that data is that it has had a little slight increase from the last month. And we're seeing the same thing from a few other of our magnetometers globally. China's shown the same thing, slight increase. Over here in the UK, it has shown again a slight increase, and we're seeing that from Arizona as well. So, you know, even though the poles are on this planet still in migration, you would expect to see in these magnetic intensities a slight decrease, but what we're seeing is quite the opposite. It has gone up a little bit. But we have seen over the last 6 months it slightly going down, so now it seems to be recovering those 2 or so microteslas that it lost. Be interesting to just see what's going on over the next few months to see if the trend continues with that. A few other things coming up in this video. We're going to have a look at the CO2, and the reason why we're going to do that, because we're at a point in time where it is pretty unique, you've got to admit, where probably 90% of the world's traffic is parked up, and that means that 90% of the world's pollution that goes into the atmosphere isn't at this point in time, and therefore you'd expect to see in the at least CO2 reservoirs in the atmosphere a decrease, especially if mankind is responsible for that. But I just want to say something. If you're in the UK, don't you find it a coincidence that since we've been in lockdown, you know, the weather's been, you know, pretty good. In general, we've had, you know, nearly 3 weeks of good, sunny, warm weather, as opposed to what we're usually accustomed to, you know, that rain all the time. So just putting that out there, it could just be a coincidence. It could be to do with the fact that, you know, it's not just CO2 that gets put into the atmosphere for all the combustion engines and the, you know, power stations that running, etc., etc. It could also be other pollutants that, you know, change our weather patterns. But I'm just curious that it is falling in a time where everyone's been in lockdown. 90% of the world's traffic has come to a halt. You know, just putting that out there. We'll have a look at the CO2 anyhow a bit later on in this video, and we'll see what's going on there. But I did make a measurement, I think it was last week, and it was at 428 parts per million, so not really much of a shift officially from that site in Hawaii at the top of that mountain where they do the official CO2 readings. It's supposed to be at about 108 parts per million, sorry, 408 parts per million. So, you know, we're seeing it slightly higher over here. You know, we're not in a busy city here in the UK where the observatory is situated, and, you know, we're in quite a clean environment. So, you know, I would like to think that, you know, being at 300 meters altitude, I know that's not a great deal and nothing in comparison with the observatory in Hawaii, but, you know, I'd like to think that we could get a fair reading of the CO2 where we are. It'd be great if a few other people would come on board and, you know, purchase a CO2 meter and give us the readings from their locations. I think, you know, that would give us a mean CO2 reading globally if we had plenty of them out there. I am still in the process of trying to start something up here in the UK, and hopefully we can get it international at a later date. It's going to be a later date, probably we're talking a few years away, and we have got a few projects that we've got to finish here off at the observatory in any case. I mean, our priority at the moment is getting magnetometers out there to different locations. We have got a few locations that we'd love to get magnetometers out to, like Brazil, as well as a muon detector, and over in Russia or India or Pakistan, somewhere like that. You know, we could get some readings from there. We have got one which is going to go out to Jeff, a muon detector down in Perth. I understand it's going to be really difficult to get one in South Central Australia, mainly because it's just desert, and, you know, not many people down there have internet connections in any case. So I do understand that, Jeff, you know. So yeah, you know, we just do our best here with what we got available, but we have got, you know, a great platform here And there is a lot of great people that support the observatory, not just in the fact that they will willingly accept some of our equipment to record the intensities in their regions from their homes, but we've also got some fantastic people that also support the channel financially. Just to mention a few: Doug, Jen, Bob, Kathy, Susan. You guys know who you are. And of course, there's a lot of other people as well, but I know that these guys that I mention are always there supporting us month in, month out, and without that support we just simply wouldn't be in a situation where we are right now, where we are constantly I know it's gradually taking place, but we are constantly expanding and expanding. We really need to get these magnetometers out there now. So again, if you're in Brazil, get in touch with me. I really want to get one of my magnetometers out there. I want to get one of our muon detectors out there, and let's see what's going on in that South Atlantic anomaly. This information is really important to us, because once we get a muon detector out there, we'll be able to get a gauge on how much radiation is inbound on one of the weakest field intensities on our planet, and this is simply something that we can't get from our governments. So if we can do it ourselves, we get a heads up on that, and we get the information out to everybody else, as well as all the other things we do, like with the Trimag and all that. There is some work going on this week. I did manage to get my spool of filament for the 3D printer, and I'll show you what I've printed off, just to get my head around how things work. I've got to say this, 3D printing and computer-aided design is a lot like programming. You have to think a lot ahead, and I'll just show you what I've printed. I mean, there's two abortions really. They haven't come out very good at all, although the dimensions was very good. The actual finished product is poor, and that's because it's a learning curve. I've just learned how important infill is, as well as setting the correct nozzle temperature, and there's a lot of variables with 3D printing. It's like getting the temperature of the nozzle, the extruder correct, getting the bed temperature correct, and this is one of the problems I had. I got the bed temperature way too hot, and as I was building the walls of these boxes, which I'll show you in a bit, they started to warp before it was finished. So there's a lot I want to change with what I've designed. I'm obviously building the muon detector boxes myself. I want to build something not just stickle brick shape, squares and flat shapes. I want to try and get some shape into it. We live in 2020, for God's sake. So yeah, with a little bit more work put into the CAD, we can get a better finished product. But yeah, on a whole, guys, with the magnetic intensities that we've got around the world, they seem to be creeping up a little bit. Let's go and have a look at the CO2. We'll have a look at that 3D printing that I've done. Don't forget, it's the first thing I've ever printed off on a 3D printer, so it's very much prototype at the moment. It just gives you an idea of what you need to do to tweak it up, make it look a bit better. So let's get on with that and have a look at it. Yeah? As we can see, it's on around about 408, 409 parts per million, the CO2 in the atmosphere. That's 20 parts per million less than what it was the last time I measured it, and maybe that is to do with the fact that we're not using our vehicles. I know around a week ago I took a measurement and it was higher than that, but even though it is reading 408, 409 parts per million, it's irrelevant, because that is still very low levels. And I know the government are saying, oh, we've driven up the CO2 by all the pollutants and all that, but things have benefited as a result of that. The earth has got greener. If we drove the parts per million down to 150 parts per million, we'd start to shut down all that green biodiversity that we can see outside. And if that happened, it would be the end for humanity. So 408 parts per million isn't very high. We can, if I brought that CO2 meter into this living room, it'd be up nearly 1,000 parts per million. So, it doesn't affect us, and it certainly doesn't affect the oxygen reservoir in our atmosphere, which is currently over 21%. Okay, if more CO2 goes into the atmosphere, it doesn't deplete the reservoir of oxygen, because the reservoir of oxygen is absolutely enormous. it's 20% of our atmosphere. CO2 is a trace gas, and it makes up very little of 1%. And that includes all the other trace gases that are in that 1%, like krypton, xenon, all the other noble gases and things like that that's in our atmosphere. But look, 406 parts per million, even lower than what that observatory in Hawaii is showing us that it's at. It's gone down to 404 parts per million. It might even go below 404. So there has been a reduction over the last week of CO2 in our atmosphere. I might as well just tell you the muon rates are slightly lower than when we last measured them as well. We're at 517 muons per hour per square metre. So, we're seeing, just to round up things, we're seeing an increase in the magnetosphere microteslas by about 2 microteslas. We're still seeing the poles migrate relatively at the same rate as what they have been now for 9 months. We've seen a slight drop, as we can see, in the CO2. And we need to really get the muon detectors out to Brazil, and I'll get one out to Jeff as well. This is a project that we've been testing our 3D printer on. I don't know how well you can see this, how well the light's affecting what you can see. What I was trying to do for our colloidal silver generators is build a housing for them, just to see what it would look like. Obviously you can see I got the measurements for the circuitry inside there correct, but I got confused with the infill. That's why we've got this terrible finish on there. And as you can see, it's slightly warped. If you look down the side of it, you can see there's a bevel on one side, or a concave on one side, and a bulge on the other of both of these muon detectors. It did do the exhausts really well. So it draws air in through the top for the pump. That provides the bubbles to remove the colloidal silver off the silver bullion rods that are in there. And it exhausts through these little vents that I put in there. Like I say, it's like programming a lot, designing CAD. Your hardware is what you print off in 3D, and your software, in this case, would be the computer-aided design software. So, you have to think very forwardly. I'm going to show you things like that. You have to put these little bevels on there so that when you sit the lids on there, they don't fall off. And I had to put these little feet on there, if you can call them that, all these little stumps here, so that when you put the lid on, it doesn't fall all the way through. The lids are a little bit big, so I've got to make some adjustments. I've got to alter the infill on the 3D printer to increase the infill. I thought by reducing the infill, what that would mean, it would print solid, but it's the opposite. The more infill you add, and thinking about it now, it makes a bit more logic sense. The more infill you add, the more solid the 3D print is. But this was just the very first thing I've printed off with the printer. I had a few problems with it as well. For some reason, it wouldn't allow the slicer program that I brought. I think it's simply 3D print. That's the company I brought it off. It was about £120 sterling. And you need a slicer program to put your 3D CAD design in, and what that does is it converts the drawing then into machine code, and then it'll print it off. So it's been a big learning curve for me, learning how to use in a way that can be productive the CAD program, and then setting up the 3D printer, because what we're going to be doing is manufacturing our own magnetometer boxes and muon detector boxes in the not too distant future. So I mean, the second print I'll show you. Obviously I'll do these again, and there's another thing, guys, as well. This 3D printer stuff is so slow. It took 8 hours to print these two off. It was so slow. Now you can increase the rate of speed, but you reduce the rate of quality. That's the trade-off. But we'll say this: 3D printers are good for prototyping. I dare say that once I get all these little things that have gone wrong with this sorted out, if I was to take this to a plastic manufacturer and give them the CAD design. They could then take that CAD design, make the tooling, and we could have these lids and things manufactured in plastic, and the finish would be a lot more successful. But what the 3D printer gives me the ability to do is prototype, and that is really great for what we need, because most of the stuff we build anyhow is prototypes, but it just gives me that extra ability. We're going to be building in 4 sections the cloud chamber housing that houses all the bits in it, and that's going to give us a bit more of a professional look to it, and it's going to give us the ability to clear up all the pipes, the wires, the power packs, and get a nice clean viewing screen there, so that we can see what's going on in the cloud chamber when the alcohol is condensing. We should be able to see those muons and things like that, those elementary particles that we have bombing around us all the time, and is on the increase now due to two things. A weakened magnetosphere over the last 100 years, probably by about 20%, even though we're seeing a slight increase. We're talking probably over the last 100 years, a slight decrease of about 20% in the magnetosphere. So, it is weakening, and it will continue to weaken when the poles really do go into their reversal pattern. It will come down a lot. So, yeah, and that will in turn increase the cosmic radiation. Also, with the low solar output that we've seen now over the last 3 solar cycles, that again will allow more cosmic radiation in. So we should see some good activity when we get these things finished. Just another look at the CO2 parts per million. As you can see, what this CO2 gives us is the CO2 in parts per million. We're at 411 parts per million. On the bottom left hand screen is the temperature, and then on the right hand bottom screen part there we've got the residual humidity. And although we don't never mention the temperature and the residual humidity, we're always focusing on just the CO2 parts per million. As you can see, it's gone up to 413 now. So there's a slight variation. I have at one time, before the lockdown as well, seen it below 400 parts per million. But, when we're talking the carbon cycles, we got something like 800 gigatons coming off the ocean into the atmosphere every year. We've got another 800 gigatons coming off the land mass. And, when you're talking about human input, it's only at, 40 gigatons. Our input is a lot less. I've got to show you guys this story if you can see that cat. I'm surprised he's brave enough to go back out there. This is the one that the fox had the other day, and flipped him into the air. So I'm surprised he's gone back into that field. You just see him there, being very precautious, and I don't blame him. Okay, guys, I'm going to leave it here. All I can say is thanks for those that have been supporting us over the time. I know it's difficult times for a lot of people, and if you want to join us and help support us, step up to that line and keep us going here at the Observatory. It is difficult times for even us here at the Observatory at the moment. Then there is a link down there. It's not compulsory, guys. It's entirely up to you. But we deliver. Hopefully, you do appreciate the service that we deliver on this very unique topic. So the link's down there if you want to help support us. And if you want a Clydril silver generator, I do have one left over from from the last batch that I made. So it's £80 postage and packaging. I do know if it's in the United States, it's about £15 to get it sent to you over there. So add £15, so £95 if you want one from the States. If it's in the UK, don't worry about it. It usually costs about £2 or £3 to get it to you. So if you're in the UK, don't worry about the postage and packaging. But there's one left if anyone wants it. Just put it in the PayPal or donate in the PayPal. It's entirely up to you. Okay, I'll leave you there, guys. Have a great day. Be safe.